Thank you and good morning. I've been given a very limited area to talk on here, which is probably a good thing, because someone who comes from a marketing background and is going to talk about engineering issues, it gets a little interesting. From our side, the issue with earthquakes is they strike at an unknown time, with an unknown force, and they give untold damage, and they go on forever. Now, that's a lot of unknowns, and from a business perspective, business doesn't like unknowns. And so that causes risk. And I think we're all aware of our risk mitigation measures, our plans, all of the things we do. Our first learning was actually a lot of those plans are useless. Throw them out and work with the team that you have. So what did we do to try and build up a level of knowledge? The first thing we've done in the past is looked at the probability of earthquakes, the impact that they will have on our business, and particularly looking at those areas that are essential for Canterbury. And I'm just going to have some pictures running through it as we talk. I'm not going to put words up, they just give you an indication of some of the things we've been dealing with at the port. Unlike Jim, we had a lot of damage, and a lot of damage that we had expected, to be quite honest. So in terms of building our seismic resilience, for us it's knowing about, as I said, our probability, impact, and then working out what the cost trade-offs are. Like any business, there is a cost between building resilience to a very high level and a lower level, and understanding what that will do for your wider community. The next thing we've done over a number of years is run simulations of earthquakes. So we've taken actual earthquakes that have happened in Canterbury, particularly around the main fault line, and said, what impact will that have on us? We put that together with a very good knowledge of our assets. So we have engineering staff who run over our major assets at the most every year and otherwise every second year. So we know what should happen in an earthquake. So what did happen? Well, this is a picture, by the way, of an oil wharf, and if you're wondering what all those pretty colours are, they're vector diagrams, and they show what has happened to a wharf and how it's moved, and how much it's moved compared with what we simulated. Interestingly, the first wharf we moved, we had estimated for the size earthquake we had in September that it would move by 280 millimetres out to sea. It moved 267. The engineers were actually having a party on that, and they were delighted. But the value of it was, we knew the condition of our assets, we knew what the impact was, we knew where they'd been damaged, and that allowed us to focus very quickly on where our problem areas were. Like Jim, we recognised that the Richter scale is not a good measure. We work in ground accelerations. For us, it's how quickly the ground has moved, and that shakes our assets, moves Earth sideways, does damage to us. So we knew the state of our assets, we knew what we expected to happen in an earthquake, we found pretty much what we expected to happen had happened, and that allowed us to very quickly target the areas that we had problems in. For us, unlike a lot of buildings, it's very, very difficult to get a quick assessment because the majority of our damage is actually below the seabed level. It's piles that have been shunted sideways, and as a result they look like an old person's hands. They're all crooked, broken and bent in an area that you can't get a visual inspection of. So we then set about fixing our problems. This is an example of the container terminal. What happened there were three major things. Firstly, our cranes, and these beasts are about 1,000 tonnes each, jumped off their rails. And they did what they were meant to do. They were meant to jump off their rails because that meant they disconnected from the movement of the wharf and moved to their own moment. And it meant that they survived. We've had people up those cranes in earthquakes. I think the kind of measure they say is they kick about 5 metres up and down when they're out on a boom. So it's a pretty big piece of equipment moving around very quickly in a dangerous way, potentially dangerous way. But for us, we knew what had happened. We were able to get those cranes back on their rails within 48 hours, and a few hours later, the cargo working. Exactly the same with the berth. We could look underneath, see some problems, fix those relatively quickly, and the land took a little bit longer because we had a lot of slumping and things we had to work to. This is a picture up above the coal berth. The coal berth had a lot of damage. The first 2 rows of piles were all broken, and then further damage further across. But again, we could measure very quickly what had happened, know where our problems were, and know what we needed to do to mitigate those. Now, this is an example of some of the conditions that people have to work in our port when things do go wrong. That's underneath a wharf. You can see someone welding with the tide coming in, etc., etc. An example where we took a different view was the oil wharf, which obviously is very, very important to Canterbury. We looked at that and said, actually, if it keeps on moving and a bit more damage, it's okay, we can hook some pipes up and we can still get oil in. So again, it was a matter of looking at our structures, knowing what they'd do and knowing what our contingencies were in the event of a major event such as we had, or events. So what makes it work? What makes it work from our perspective is good knowledge of your assets, good knowledge of what may come in the different types of natural disasters we have, very good people. So people who can react quickly, find innovative solutions and implement them. And they're backed up, in our case, with a lot of contractors. We had contractors in the port within 24 hours of all the major events, working for us, making sure things happened, and really getting things moving along. So from our perspective, if you get those components together, you get things moving very, very quickly, and you can get yourself into a position where you are back and up and operating very quickly. We spent a bit of time seeing our customers, obviously, after this event. The Chinese were very interesting. Their view was an event like this would shut them for about 2 months because they don't have a knowledge of their infrastructure and they don't know what they need to do to repair it. That's my talk on the formal part. The only other thing I'm going to say to people is be an opportunist. Out of these events come opportunities. And the picture I've got up here is of our reclamation. So we very quickly, after a lot of buildings were knocked over, said, here's an opportunity. We need land. The city needs to dispose of a lot of hard fill. The two go together. We get a benefit. The city gets a lower cost. We were, in some of the more bureaucratic parts of town, called opportunists. I make no apologies for it. It was a great outcome. So have a go when you get a chance before the creeping hand of bureaucracy comes around you again. Thank you very much.